2016 will probably go down in history as a pretty consequential year because there's several events that took place which arguably derailed us from the path that we've been on for the past 30 years or so. And some of those very important events that took place, of the many, could be the rise of Donald Trump, along with all the other far right-wing uprisings in Europe, which we would call, I guess, the Trump effect. Another one was Brexit, the Paris Climate Agreement. And I think looking forward to 2017, I think it's safe to say that there will be more of these upsets coming forward. And of the many or several that we'll most likely see in the next 12 months or so, I have 3 here that I want to go over that I think are going to continue 2016's wrath. And they're basically 3 elections. And not only will they decide the fate of the international project, but also, in my opinion, make or break the EU. And the first one is the Netherlands. Holland will have an election on March 2017, and currently it's led by a gentleman by the name of Geert Wilders or Wilders. Sorry to anyone who knows Dutch if I said that wrong. But anyway, he leads the Freedom Party. And I first heard about him a few years ago. He's well known for his anti-immigration rhetoric, specifically relating to Islam. He wants to ban the Quran, ban all the Arabs in the country, and I think kick out all the Muslims in Holland. Not only that, he's promised to call for a Brexit-style EU referendum to decide the fate of the Netherlands' membership in the European Union. And the reason I'm speaking about him is because in the recent poll, he has a 13-point lead ahead of the People's Party, which is kind of like a centrist, liberal conservative party. Kind of like Canada's Liberals. 13-point lead is quite significant. And even though March is about 6 months away, that's still pretty interesting to talk about because with Euroscepticism so high all over the continent, it's tough to say or even think that this guy won't be taken seriously. And a lot of politicians in Holland and around the world are saying he has no chance. No one will work with this guy, he's too radical. But you know what, when you win an election, people have no other chance but to work with you. So I don't see that as a very compelling argument. And Brussels sees this guy as quite problematic because they thought the same thing about a year ago when there was a vote put up to the public whether or not a big trade deal would take place between Holland and Ukraine. And the people of the Netherlands overwhelmingly turned it down. Now, in my own ignorance, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if that trade deal was in the interests of the vast majority of people or not. I don't really know much about that. However, these people in Brussels, they thought it was a sure win. And they seem to be pretty sure this guy's going to lose. And given Trump, given Le Pen in France, given the parties in Hungary, Brexit, I wouldn't rule it out. I think it'd be really dangerous to rule this guy out. And if he does succeed and win and pull out the Netherlands, it's going to very much influence the next election in France, which is April-May 2017. Now, Marine Le Pen, over the past several months, has seen a huge surge in the polls. She has very strong anti-immigration rhetoric, like Wilders, kicking out Muslims, banning Muslim immigration to the country. Not only that, she wants a Frexit on the table to pull France out of the EU and even possibly NATO. And if you think this is ridiculous, not going to happen. France has left NATO before. You think they can't do it again? You ever heard the term history repeats itself? It could happen. You know, the current president's administration, Francois Hollande, is so unpopular right now. He's at 6% of the polls. 6%. Literally everyone hates him. Doesn't matter what their political allegiance is, everyone hates this guy. And when one party is that disliked, they generally go with another party. And in this case, they're not going to go with a moderate like Sarkozy. He got his ass kicked too in the primary so far. They're going to go with Le Pen or this next guy by the name of François Fillon. Sorry if I said that wrong. Former Prime Minister of France, was just nominated as the nominee for the Republican Party in France. And he just overtook Le Pen. And like Marine Le Pen, very strong anti-immigration policy rhetoric, kicking out Muslims, banning immigration, whatnot, combating domestic terrorism as one of his cornerstone policies. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Now, unlike Le Pen, he doesn't want to leave the EU. He wants to reform from within. I guess, in my opinion, it's probably just politician speak for playing it safe. I don't really know what he's going to do. However, one thing is almost certain. France probably will go far right. And even though Fillon is part of a Republican Party, is something of a centrist party, he has taken this party very far right. He's much more, I guess, radical than Sarkozy was. And if France does leave the EU, there's basically nothing left for the Union. Like, there's no reason for Germany to continue on in this. Or the Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Denmark. So, this next election in France, in my opinion, is the most consequential. And if France does leave, this next election in Germany, which is going to take place in between August to October of 2017, could see Angela Merkel lose. Now, right now, she's pretty much the only leader in Europe who's somewhat respected at home and abroad. And they could very well win. Let's keep it real. However, there are forces in German politics which are seeing her scrutinized, not just from opposition parties, but her own party. And that's especially come to light amid the recent Berlin attacks. And one of the most vicious critics of hers, which is actually experiencing a pretty spike in the polls right now, is the AfD party, which for the first time is to the right of Merkel's party. They're called the Alternative for Deutschland. Very hardline approach to immigration. Put Germany first. Fuck all these immigrants. They want to leave the EU. And if you have Germany, which is arguably the only country who benefits from the EU, if you see them, out, then the whole project's dead. And I don't know what the AfD is going to do if they win. But I think one thing that Merkel has as an Achilles heel, in my opinion, is that she's in coalition with the Social Democratic Party, which has been traditionally a socialist party in Germany. And when you have a right-wing party and a left-wing party basically putting forward the same policies, it's very easy for a German voter to think to themselves, well, you guys are pretty much the same. You're not looking out for my interest. You're basically serving the European technocrat class. I'm going to go with the AfD. I'm not saying that's going to happen. Could it? Absolutely. It's possible. After Brexit, Trump and all that, anything's possible. No one is safe. So, these three elections, in my opinion, like I mentioned, could very well see the EU completely gone. Now, some people think that's a good thing, and I'm not going to lie. There are valid economical arguments against staying in the EU. However, in my opinion, for all the flaws that the European Union has, and there are many, let's keep it real, I do think the fundamental principles of the EU are very important and should be cherished. You know, like the free flow of money, people, and ideas throughout the entire continent has seen with it an era of almost unprecedented growth. And when we look at the reasons why the EU was put together in the first place, it was to promote peace, minimize war, and create prosperity. So, my question is, given what we know about European nationalism over the centuries, do we want to go back to a time where all these European countries are pursuing their own self-interests at the expense of others? We've seen what happens when Germany acts in its own interests. It's led to domination of the continent, widespread famine. I'm not picking on Germany. France too. Do we want to see a potential European empire coming to place? You know, when has that ended well? When has there been more peace and prosperity than in the last 60 years? Like, I understand how people are frustrated. I understand that the EU has many flaws. But, you know, are Le Pen, Geert Wilders, and the AFD, is this really the solution we want to go with? Do you really think in the back of your mind that this direction is going to put the world in a better place long term? Given how integrated the world is right now? Do you really think that's not going to end up in a potential disaster in the future? I can't predict the future. I'm not saying it's going to. But don't you think it's better to maybe just try to work together to find a solution to all these problems? Whether it's climate change, whether it's immigration, whether it's income inequality, which is driving most of European citizens to vote in this way. You know, I think we can look through human history. When we've progressed together, not as individual countries. But to be honest with you, I'm not going to be surprised if the EU falls apart. I think it's almost inevitable at this point. And to be fair, it's kind of the EU's fault. This whole project was fundamentally flawed from day one. There was no way that this would have worked out without any political union involved. And that's my other point. I feel like there really are only two avenues we can go by. It's to say the hell with the EU, or to integrate further and create something like the United States of Europe. I happen to think that might be a more viable alternative. However, given that the EU is set up in a way where only a handful of countries really benefit, and within the handful of countries that really benefit, still only a handful of people really benefit, which, like in many cases around the world, it's the rich, it's the multinational corporations, whereas the people are kind of kicked to the side. And that's why, like I mentioned, I understand the frustration, and I could see how the AFD or Le Pen could be seen as a seductive alternative. But, that's not my decision to make. That's the people of Europe's decision. And I only hope that they really think things through when making any decision going forward. And if you live in Europe, if you live anywhere, please write a comment, because you probably have personal experience, personal insight that I and maybe other viewers might not have. So please write a comment below or send a response video. If you don't live in Europe, if you have any additional value to add, as always, please write a comment, like, and subscribe. And thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, Happy New Year. Thanks a lot.